Imagine standing on the Atlantic coast in the early 1600s. Behind you is Europe. In front of you is a vast continent. There are no United States yet. There is no American superpower. Only a collection of European colonies beginning to take shape. England is building settlements along the eastern coast of North America. In 1607, Jamestown is established in what becomes Virginia. Years later, Plymouth becomes another important English settlement. More colonies follow along the Atlantic. Each develops its own economy and society. Some depend on farming, others grow through trade and shipping, but they all remain connected to the British Empire. Ships cross the Atlantic constantly. Goods move between America and Britain. Tobacco, timber, fish, and other products flow toward British markets. Manufactured goods travel in return. The Atlantic becomes the economic bridge. For generations, the colonists consider themselves British subjects. They speak English. They follow British laws. They read British newspapers. They fight Britain's wars. But something is changing. The colonies are becoming wealthier. Their populations are growing rapidly. By the 18th century, the 13 colonies are becoming powerful. Then Britain fights a major war against France in North America. The conflict becomes part of the larger 7 Years' War. Britain wins, but victory comes with a massive cost. The British government is deeply in debt. London decides the American colonies should help pay for imperial expenses. New taxes and regulations appear. The Stamp Act arrives in 1765. Colonists strongly oppose it. Their argument is simple. They are being taxed by Parliament without having elected representatives there. Protests spread. British authorities respond. Tensions become increasingly dangerous. Then, in 1770, British soldiers kill 5 civilians in Boston. The event becomes known as the Boston Massacre. The relationship continues deteriorating. In 1773, colonists protest the Tea Act. In Boston Harbor, they throw British tea into the water. Britain responds with punishment. The colonies respond with resistance. And eventually, the political crisis becomes revolution. In 1775, fighting begins. At Lexington and Concord, the American Revolutionary War has started. A year later, the colonies make an extraordinary decision. They declare independence. On July 4, 1776, the Declaration of Independence is adopted. But declaring independence does not create a country by itself. Britain still has an enormous military. Its navy is one of the strongest in the world. The American army is inexperienced and desperately needs supplies. George Washington takes command of the Continental Army. The war becomes a long struggle. American soldiers face hunger, disease, cold, and shortages. But Britain faces another problem. The war is happening thousands of miles away from Britain. Supplying a huge army across the Atlantic is extremely expensive. Then France enters the conflict. On the American side, French money, weapons, soldiers, and naval power become important. The war continues. Eventually, British forces are trapped at Yorktown. In 1781, Washington's army, supported by French forces, forces General Cornwallis to surrender. The fighting does not immediately end, but Britain's position becomes increasingly difficult. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris recognizes American independence. The United States is born. But now comes a surprising question. Can this new republic survive? America has won independence. It has not yet become powerful. The new nation faces enormous problems. Its government is weak. Its economy is unstable. The states often disagree. The country has limited resources. Then American leaders create a new political system. The Constitution is written in 1787. A stronger federal government is established. George Washington becomes the first president. The young republic begins expanding. Its territory grows dramatically. In 1803, the United States purchases the Louisiana Territory from France. The deal more than doubles the size of the country. American settlers move westward. New farms and towns appear. Trade expands along major rivers. Roads and canals connect regions. And eventually, railroads transform the American continent. But America's growth has a darker side. Native American nations are pushed from their lands, and slavery expands across much of the American South. This creates a contradiction. Inside the new republic, America speaks about liberty, while millions remain enslaved. For decades, the country struggles with this contradiction. Then the crisis becomes a war. In 1861, the Civil War begins. The United States is divided. The Union fights the Confederacy. Abraham Lincoln leads the Union. The war becomes one of the deadliest conflicts in American history. In 1863, Lincoln issues the Emancipation Proclamation. In 1865, the Confederacy collapses. Slavery is abolished. America survives its greatest internal crisis. And now something extraordinary happens. The United States begins industrializing at incredible speed. Railroads spread across the continent. Factories become larger. Steel production explodes. Oil becomes a major industry. Electricity transforms cities. American companies develop new methods of mass production. Immigration brings millions of people into the country. They arrive from Europe and other parts of the world. They bring skills, ideas, languages, and ambitions. America's population grows. Its cities grow even faster. New York becomes a global center. Chicago becomes an industrial giant. Pittsburgh becomes famous for steel production. Detroit becomes associated with automobile manufacturing. Meanwhile, Britain remains one of the world's great powers. The British Empire reaches across much of the globe. Britain controls territories and trade routes on multiple continents. London is a financial center. The Royal Navy protects British global interests. Britain is still enormously powerful, but the balance is beginning to change. America has something Britain lacks. On the same scale, a huge continental economy, enormous natural resources, a rapidly growing population, and increasingly powerful industries. Then comes the 20th century. The First World War changes the international balance. America enters the war in 1917. Its troops and industrial production help strengthen the Allied effort. After the war, America's economy continues growing. Factories produce automobiles and consumer goods on enormous scales. Companies such as Ford, perfect mass production. Radio becomes widespread. Hollywood grows into a global entertainment industry. American culture begins traveling far beyond American borders. Then, in 1929, the stock market crashes. The Great Depression begins. Millions lose their jobs. Banks collapse. Businesses close. America enters one of its worst economic crises. Franklin Roosevelt becomes president. His New Deal programs attempt to provide relief and recovery. The government becomes more involved in the economy. But another global crisis is approaching. World War II begins in Europe. In 1941, Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. America enters the war. The transformation is enormous. American factories begin producing aircraft, ships, tanks, weapons, and vehicles. The country becomes an industrial powerhouse for the Allies. By 1945, Germany and Japan have been defeated. Europe and Asia are devastated. But America's industrial base has survived largely intact. The United States emerges from the war more powerful than ever. Britain, meanwhile, has won the war too, but victory has come at enormous cost. The British economy is exhausted. The empire is increasingly difficult and expensive to maintain. America now has enormous economic and military power. The relationship between the two countries changes. Britain is no longer the undisputed global leader. The United States becomes one of the world's two superpowers. Then the Cold War begins. America competes with the Soviet Union. It invests heavily in science, technology, and military research, and the competition reaches space. In 1969, American astronauts land on the moon. Millions watch the achievement. It becomes a symbol of American technological power. But America's influence is not only military. Its universities attract students from around the world. Its companies expand globally. Its movies, music, technology, and consumer products spread everywhere. The English language itself becomes deeply connected to American culture and business. Meanwhile, Britain changes too. The British Empire gradually declines. India becomes independent in 1947. Other colonies follow. The empire that once covered a huge portion of the world slowly disappears. Britain remains influential, but its role is different. America has inherited much of the economic and strategic influence once associated with Britain. And this is where the title of our story becomes important. Britain helped create America through colonization, language, institutions, trade, and political traditions. But America eventually became larger, richer, and more powerful. The student eventually surpassed the teacher. Yet the story is not really about Britain losing everything. The relationship remains close. The two countries fight together in major wars. They cooperate in intelligence. They share language and culture. They become close political allies. Britain helped shape the foundations of America. America then developed those foundations on an enormous scale, from 13 colonies to a continental republic, from a struggling new nation to an industrial giant, from industrial giant to global superpower. The transformation took centuries, and it was never simple. America's rise involved innovation, immigration, economic growth, military power, and expansion. It also involved slavery, war, displacement, and inequality. Britain's history contains similar contradictions. Both nations were shaped by enormous ambition. But perhaps the most fascinating part is what happened to their relationship. Britain once ruled America. America eventually became one of the world's dominant powers. Yet the language spoken in both countries remained connected. The political institutions shared important historical roots, and the Atlantic remained a bridge rather than simply a boundary. Today, when you look at America, you are looking at a country whose origins are deeply connected to British history. And when you look at Britain, you are looking at the country that once controlled the colonies, that would eventually become America. Two countries, one shared historical beginning, and a transformation that changed the modern world.